Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a Protea, an absolutely amazing flower. So grab your paints and let's get started. Okay, so to paint a Protea, we're going to do a King Protea today. I'm just going to draw a bit of a central stem line, and then that little curve is where the actual flower is going to open. Now, the King Protea, well, all Proteas have this incredible sort of single, very striking flower, but inside is this kind of gently pointed dome, and then around the outside, so I'm just sort of doing a cross section here, is where we suddenly have lots of quite spiky, succulent-like petals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in a few of these. If you've not seen one of these things before, I highly recommend you go and have a look, because they have to be seen to be believed. And then I do have one in my book, New Botanical Painting. So I'm now just sort of creating the tops of the petals, and then they sort of get more squat as they come down and they sort of point out a bit more. So we're just sort of creating this shape, and then it gets just shorter and squatter as we get into the base. There we go. And then quite a broad stem, and we'll paint in the rest. I don't want to do too much drawing. That's not really what I'm about. But we could have our prongs, our petal prongs, going a bit higher. And yeah, that's what we're going to start with. So as I said, if you haven't seen one of these things before, have a little look online, because they are quite something to behold. Now, I recommend that you lightly rub out your pencil so that it's really, really faint. A lot of people ask me how I rub out my pencil once I've done a painting. Well, it's largely because I make sure the pencil is really faint in the first place. However, when I'm filming, I need to make sure the pencil is just a little bit stronger for you all to be able to see it. Now, I'm mixing up some colours here. I've got yellow ochre. I did also just wake up the permanent rose in my palette. I think I need to refill my yellow ochre at this rate. There we go. See, there's still tons of colour to be had, even if you've got a fairly empty palette there. I also want cadmium yellow woken up. All these lovely sort of warm tones. Got the cadmium orange there. They're going to create a range of blushes, and then also Alizarin Crimson there as well. For the sake of control, I'm going to begin with a size 2 brush. Now, the order in which we paint things is quite important. So I'm going to start with a nice, fairly dilute, yellowy yellow ochre. So I'm mixing cadmium yellow in with yellow ochre, just in the well of my palette there. But I'm also adding plenty of water. And I'm going to begin by painting in. And I'm not worrying about sort of not staying in, I'm not really staying in between the lines each time. So I'll paint like 2. Here we go. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of permanent rose into the top end. And then to finish off, a little bit of Alizarin Crimson, and this one I'm also going to just help shape the point. So let me do that again, just to demonstrate yellow ochre and cadmium yellow mix. And it's also sort of putting down a wash for the rest of the colours to blend in up on. Then Permanent Rose, just a few strokes of that towards the top, not blending too far. And then Alizarin Crimson just at the top, in the tip there. And we're going to go all the way around of those top points. So we're just in the basic wash stage at this point, so we're not being too overly fussed about all the detail, but the important thing is that we're just keeping things really nice and light. So I'm moving down into the next layer of Protea points. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm starting with the yellow ochre yellow colour. Also, you want to make sure that your previous petals have dried. And I'm going to do the same process, but I am going to introduce one new colour. So I'll get my little bit of Alizarin Crimson on the go. But there's almost like a purpley grey colour that starts to creep in, and French Ultramarine Blue and Alizarin Crimson make the perfect purpley tone. And again, we don't want much of it. I'm just going to run it down the middle where we had the Permanent Rose in as well. So let's do another one. Yellow ochre colour, bit of Permanent Rose, and you can see it's really not much. Let's get a bit of that purple in as well, and then use Alizarin Crimson to just crisp it up at the end. And I'm doing all of this with a size 2 brush, and that is the beauty of these brushes, is that the pointed round style brush is so versatile and allows you to do a painting with pretty much one brush. I mean, I don't know how we'll get on with the size 2 brush when we get into more detail, but it's doing a great job at the moment. So we'll just continue round and keep going. I decided to add in 1 or 2 extra little ones of this second layer just in there. I hadn't drawn them in, but it felt right to. Okay, so now we're moving down, so we've got to make sure it's dry as you keep on going down, because we're now doing, we're layering up a bit now. So I'm still using the same technique of the yellow ochre colour. Drop in that, and the purple will just be a bit more prominent now. And then the Alizarin Crimson, I actually think we could get a bit of the blue in to that more concentrated tip. So what's happening there is you've got the crisp outer edge because the area around it is dry, but the bleeding inwards because inside is wet. So this is a slightly more sort of challenging flower painting, but I feel like, we've been on this journey now for 2 years. The channel is 2 now, which is amazing. So I like to push us all a little bit from time to time. But the Protea is an amazing flower. I think you either love it or you're maybe a bit freaked out by it, because it's got a slightly otherworldly quality to it, isn't it? But it is absolutely amazing to have a closer look at and have a bit of a study of. I think a lot of people wonder how on earth you approach painting a Protea when there's just a lot going on, and with watercolour, of course, we need to be layering up and not really knowing what to be painting first or second. Well, the most important thing, I think, is that you start really nice and dilute and then you can always add more. But starting off heavy and dark and concentrated will mean you haven't got very much further to go. So these two are probably going to bleed into each other. That's fine. Bit of purple, bit of pink. I'm automatically sort of cleaning off my brush and then also blotting it off each time when I'm getting a new colour. I feel like that's probably all the layers we'd see of that one there, but again, this is going to need to dry before we move down to our final layer. We're nearly there. Okay, you know the drill by now. Size 2 brush. Let's get some yellow on the go. And this time a bit more purple. That might be a little bit red. Let's get a little bit more of the blue in there. Cool. So we'll just get right down to the base and then we can look at the other elements. That's looking really lovely. So let's have a think about the centre of the flower. I've just added a little bit of Paynes Grey and Prussian blue into what was the Alizarin Crimson French Ultramarine blue mix. But then what's most important is I've just added plenty of water to make it really dilute. It's all about the water. And I think we can still keep going with our size 2 brush. So the first thing to do is to deal with the sort of slightly rough edges of the base of some of these flowers here. In fact, I think I'm going to just change my water over. So I just want to sort of soften them. So I've just got a clean wet brush and we're just blending just a little bit. Just to get rid of any kind of stuff we don't want. It's a clever little trick with watercolour. So you can sort of re-wake up just 1 or 2 little bits and pieces. And then I think we're going to go down to a size 3/10. And I'm going to begin. Oh, we might need the size 2 again, who knows, let's see. What I want to do is start to sort of create a sense of the roundness of the shape of the Protea and start sort of stroking the colour up in towards the centre. And I will add the tiniest bit more Paynes Grey right to the base where it can just catch some of that colour to help define the edges here. So you can pop a bit of that in and then just blend it up. So that's the summit, so we can start to sort of drag down from there as well. And actually towards the centre it's sort of slightly more shorter strokes required to capture the texture, because that little bit of water work we did right at the beginning will have sort of settled in and dried by now. So that has just helped create this rather curious central dome to this flower. It's all very curious, this flower. And we will now focus our attention on the stem underneath. So I think we need a bit of green gold, a bit of sap green, burnt sienna, Paynes Grey just in there as our shadowy mix, but actually just knocking back the brightness there. And I'm going to take a size 2 brush, starting at the top, and it's quite a wet translucent stem because there's something really cool we're about to do now. This is my smaller brush. I'm going to sort of paint in little knobbles that are going to bleed in to the side of the stem. How cool is that? And now I want to add a little bit of the brown colour. So you want to work quite fast so that you can really get this in there. And then we've got these incredible leaves. Now I am going to be using the rigger brush, which I love very much, which is one of the more recently available brushes on my website and in Etsy. And I always say don't mix with the rigger brush, and yet I insist on doing it. I'm going to also mix up some leaf colour. So I think a bit of turquoise, cobalt turquoise here. Need to wake it up. Cobalt turquoise mixed in with some sap green will give us a good Protea leaf. So they're really interesting leaves. They have long, slender branches, hence the use of the rigger brush, and then lovely broad leaves, almost like a sort of eucalyptus leaf. So I'm going to begin by just painting the long stems, and that's quite cool if it bleeds in. And they can be sort of coming out at slightly different angles. I've chosen to not worry about putting them so that the leaves kind of come over the front of things, over the front of the Protea. I want the Protea to be the focus. And now I'm going to use my size 4 brush to begin to create these rather interesting leaves. Bit of turquoise in there. So they're quite broad, they're very smooth-sided. Got a gentle point at the top of them. Just dropping in a bit of turquoise at the base. So I'm choosing to paint in every other leaf for the moment. And then once those have dried, we can paint in the other ones. I popped in 1 or 2 extra little leaves just whilst I was waiting for these to dry, but these are all dry now and they've blended really beautifully. I'm really pleased with that. And this time I'm going to add just a little bit more of the, some of the French Ultramarine blue. We didn't have any of that previously, just to get a slight contrast of colour. And here we go. So I'm now going to paint in. So it's quite hard to see that I'm going to add in another, there we go. I couldn't really see that, and that one as well. We couldn't see that one very well. Okay, yeah. So if you need to do that, go for it. And I'm just going to do the same technique. Smoothing it in. This time adding a bit of French Ultramarine blue as well as the cobalt turquoise. I think this is looking really lovely. Even though these obviously aren't translucent leaves in real life, I just think it's a lovely technique. My watercolour painting is all about capturing the essence of a piece. I'm not a traditional botanical painter. We'd be here a lot longer painting these plants. The YouTube tutorials would be epics. I'll just smooth that one in, just drying a little unevenly. Okay, so I think that's all our leaves done for branches. So what we're going to do now is let it dry 100%, and I'm actually going to rub out the pencil at this stage, and then we can go back in and just make the Protea flower really shine. So there really was quite a lot of pencil going on in there. So I'm now just mixing up some of the sort of darker detailed purpley blue, and I can use that to start to really sort of add a bit more detail. So there isn't like a huge amount of sort of texture on the Protea petals, but what we do want to get is just a lovely crisp edges. So just working my way up from the bottom. I mean, you do get a little bit of sort of dusty texture, you know, when you get on a succulent, just a little bit of sort of cloudiness. So those ones have already been quite defined, but these ones up here need to be defined a bit more. This, by the way, right now I'm using a 3/10 brush, and I'm going to just get a little bit of the blue in with the Alizarin Crimson. Clean off the brush, just blend it down in a little bit. So yeah, so we're just finding those shapes, defining them a little bit more, whether it's with actual bit of texture on the brush like this, getting a bit of cloudiness there, or just going really defined at the top there. Really, that dark bit only wants to be right at the top. So clean off my brush, just get a little bit of water, play around with that a little bit. And then finish it off with a bit of more concentrated colour. So I think that makes a huge amount of difference, just adding in those little bits of detail, and we'll do the same in the centre. So I've just got some slightly more concentrated mix here of the Paynes Grey and just going around in a circle here, and then as it starts to lengthen out, you can add a little bit of those long lines. And there we go. So I think the last thing I can do is just add maybe a little bit of shadow to the underside of the flower and the stem. So I'm just mixing up some Paynes Grey, quite dilute. Just adding a little bit of that there. But there we go, that is a King Protea, a new challenge for everyone. I really hope you have a go. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a huge thank you to our patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, just hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!